arguably my favourite piece of work of art, and maybe I've ever done, where things were very rocky with the band. And I was almost at a crossroads. And now our current manager manages Lana Del Rey. So, I've seen, and he's incredible at it. He's ruthless in a session, and he gets what he wants, and he can make hits in a day.
Yo, what's up? This is Toru, music producer, entrepreneur, and host of this show, Producer Head. Welcome to episode 43, featuring Dan Rothman of London Grammar. We talk about the art of restraint in guitar playing, what it takes to keep a band together, and how emotional honesty carries songs further than technical perfection. Let's get into it. What's up, everybody? This is Toru, and in a way, so are you. Welcome back to another episode of Producer Head. All the way from London, Dan Rothman of London Grammar. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Great to be here with you. Thank you again for being here.
Oh, pleasure.
And yeah, man, honestly, like what we were just talking about before we jumped on here is just perfect setup, honestly, because what I wanted to ask you is that through one lens, somebody could just be like, this guy is the guitarist in London Grammar. But beyond that, you also produce, you write songs, and probably a lot of other things that I can't even see and other people don't typically see immediately from the outside. So I'm kind of wondering about how you self-identify and think about who you are and what you do in relation to the band and all the other work that you do.
This is a really interesting question. I was having this conversation with, I have multiple managers now. Like there's a manager who manages London Grammar, and I also have and there are multiple managers within that framework, because London Grammar has become like a beast of a project now. And there's a touring business, and there's so many aspects to it. But I also have like a writer producer manager. So he looks after my writing career. And he said to me, he was like, what do you do? Like, what is it that you do in the studio? Because when I'm trying to get sessions with other artists, I'm trying to do the songwriting thing or produce for other artists, he needs to tell them, these are your capabilities, or like, are you a beat maker? Are you a songwriter? Are you a top liner? And I was just like, honestly, I don't fucking know. I've done this for over 10 years, in a band, and I've done everything. I think I've worn all the hats. I don't even really know if I would call myself anything in particular. As far as I think I'm aware, I just think I just make music. So I was just like, it's very hard. I think there's this thing that you have to label it. But I think I just do a bit of everything. Most of the time I'm just a psychologist. I think a lot of the time I'm just it's like understanding people, getting along. I actually think that if this is one thing I've learned, because I've been doing more songwriting, if you want to put a label on it. Basically, the context is I was in a band. Started a band. We had some success. And then in the last 5 years, just after the pandemic, I had the desire to work with different people because we had more time and we were touring less. So I became, started doing songwriting sessions, producing. I did I've done a feature film project as well, all these different projects. And I think one thing I've really noticed or understood in the last year in particular is the way to really make records, if that's what you want to do, is make records with people, make music and with good artists. I think is all about relationship. It's about you connecting with that person and them trusting you to help them bring their vision to life. And actually how good your beats are don't actually they don't make a difference if you don't understand that the artist cares more about what you want. This is what I'm talking about in particular with if you're trying to do the songwriting thing. That's how it seems to me. And I always understood what Hannah and Dot in my band wanted, and now I try to take that forward to other people I work with. Does that make sense?
100%. So I'm curious about how much of that do you think is like kind of a natural talent you were born with to kind of like be able to sense that in people, and to what extent have you maybe stolen or learned things from being around other people that you can share to help other people be better collaborators and understanders of what the underlying essence of somebody else's artistry?
That's quite an interesting question, because I do think it. I don't know if I was born with it, more like learnt it from a young age, like classic sort of like son of divorced parents. So I was always like a mediator. I'm always been like a diplomat. I think I'm a good diplomat, and I think that counts for a lot. I think that's why my band's been together for so long. And I don't think I'm just the one who say that. Anyone who knows my band, even my bandmates would say like they know that I'm the one who kind of like has always bridged the gap between the personalities of the group and also like bridged the creative differences and ultimately kept everybody calm enough just to continue all the time. Because like if you're in a, to anyone who's like trying to be in a band, it's a very difficult. I mean, it's like a tale as old as time. It's like the cliched thing of like the bands, bands break up. You just have to watch one episode. One viewing of Spinal Tap tells you everything. That was 1980. They made that. So yeah, I think like the diplomacy was always sort of in me, but I have learned a lot even since. Like I think I had a period sort of around 7, 8 years ago where things were very rocky with the band, and I was almost at a crossroads, and I think I like did a lot of inward searching, went into therapy, sort of cleaned up my life a little bit, and I think then I sort of there was that, and then also having worked with lots of different producers and writers and managers, I've had worked with some of the biggest managers in the world. Our previous manager managed Adele, and the former manager before that managed bands like The Verve and Snow Patrol, these huge British bands. And now our current manager manages Lana Del Rey. So I've seen and worked with some of the biggest producers in the world, and I think you just pick up these things, and I think I'm picking it up. I don't know, if that's how it feels. I hope anyway.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I mean, you mentioned two things, right? One is like the diplomat, which is really interesting. When I think of the diplomat, I think of somebody who is like well spoken, not necessarily detached from their emotions, but you have an ability to kind of step outside of them so that they don't like drive the bus into a wall. Also, you kind of talk about going to therapy, which is the reverse of that, right? Which is like I'm not trying to filter anything. I'm trying to get to the base and the source of what it is that I'm feeling to better understand myself.
Mm.
So I'm wondering, like, which of those things is more important to you, or how do you combine them when you are trying to like keep things together or move a session forward?
It's interesting. If you, I think in a session, I think one of my like, and I think this is an introspective thing. One of my like not non-strengths, from a personality point, or weaknesses, non-strength. One of my
It was
weaknesses,
very diplomatic to say non-strengths, but it's
exactly, it was
yeah.
well spotted. One of my weaknesses is, um, I would say, is that I try to rush things sometimes. I get edgy about time. Like if you're in a session, for example, like if you're in a session with an artist and if this you're doing a songwriting thing or a producer thing and you've never met the artist before, right? You've got one day. And if you get the opportunity with a big artist, you've got one day to make a tune, right? And that's a lot of pressure because you have to basically come out of the room with or at least this is how it feels. In order to get another shot, you need to make a demo good enough to get another chance of being in the room and to finish it or like get it released or something. It has basically you get one chance. And there's a lot of people who talk about that. And by the way, that might very well be true for a lot of songwriter producers, especially if you're like a hit maker, like in as a very clinic. And I know some of them, like big hit makers who they're clinical. They go into a room and they as a friend of mine I can think of who is this guy, and he's incredible at it. He's ruthless in a session, and he gets what he wants, and he can make hits in a day. The problem is that if you push too hard, not only can you potentially not get anything because you push the artist too hard emotionally, but also you can be in a situation where it's funny because I really want to name names, but I just can't name names. But but sometimes you can push too hard, and actually, even if you get something amazing, the artist won't use it because they don't like the experience. And that is, and the case in point with us, I won't say who it is, but put it this way: we were in Los Angeles with arguably one of the biggest songwriters on the planet, probably the biggest songwriter on the planet, right? And he wrote a song with us, and he was very pushy with us, and he was very forward with his ideas. We went with it because I think we were all a little bit like we were like this is a bit like not our vibe. Like we're just like kind of like an indie band. Like we don't do lots of writing sessions anyway. This is kind of late, like sort of in the middle of our career. Anyway, we came out of the studio with what everybody thought was a smash. They were like, our label were like, this is a smash. Our managers are like, this is it, game changer song. And we were like, we're not putting it out. Don't care. We're not interested because it didn't speak to us from a from a personal level. So and I think like there's a lot to be said about that because even I've had experiences in the last year where I've written great songs with artists in big rooms and the labels have heard them and been like, that's it. It's a song we've been looking for. It's going to come out. This is going to be the deal. And the artist didn't connect with it because I didn't build a relationship with him. I was too focused on the final product. And actually, like where I've been seemingly getting a little bit more success, certainly within the band, obviously, because but then it's a little less pressured in the band because you're. So I told you it'd be long winded. I'm sorry. Um, I'm sort of almost, this is how I operate as well. I'm almost unpicking everything I'm saying as I'm talking about it. And this is like what it's like creating. It's such a, I'm always trying to understand the process and I find it so fascinating. This is all about. This is what your podcast is about. It's what like the videos I'm making is all about, right? Um, but yeah, I right now, my gut feeling is telling me that where I'm personally getting the most success seems to be if I connect with the artist and then they trust me. And maybe this first song, someone classic story is Lana Del Rey wrote video games with a guy called Justin Parker, who's a legendary amazing songwriter. Not on the first session, not on the second session, not on the third session, but on the fourth session that they worked together. And very rarely are you given that chance anymore as a songwriter. So I think that just says a lot about, we didn't write Hey Now, which was our first big hit in the first year of working together. It took us 3 years to write that song as a band. So
Yeah, wow, man. I mean, there's so much in there. I mean, I guess
sorry, sorry, it's a
no,
lot.
it's great. No, I mean, but there's
Yeah.
just so many things I want to follow up on. So, one is like, how do you have the confidence as a band to say no to like something that everybody around you is telling you like this is like basically guaranteed money and continued success for everything that you're trying to do, and you're like, you know what, like we did that, and it's just gonna stay in the vault.
Um, I think Hannah is incredibly assured of herself as an artist. I think if she doesn't believe in it, there's really no point pushing it. And I love that about her. I'm much more easily swayed by, that's another weakness of mine, by the way. I'm much more swayed by the industry opinion that weighs upon me, wherever that's from, label managers, other producers, other writers, anyone. I just like any opinion. I take everyone's opinion too much. It drives my bandmates mad. It drives actually everyone I work with mad. To be honest. I do think it's important because again, there's like a level of diplomacy that needs to take place. You can't just say that everyone's opinion is shit because then they won't want to work with you because they want to feel like they've got input into your project. But I do think with that particular scenario, is I think you've got a scenario where the three of us were unanimous. And I think when the three of us are unanimous about an experience and about a piece of work, and if we don't believe in it together, let alone even one of us, it's not even, it's just, and you know what, like, I actually think that when this is another good example. I love examples, to be honest with you. I don't know why, but I just love like stories about because it's kind of I don't know. I just find them interesting, and I have some of my own. And like, I remember we have a song called "Hey Now," which I mentioned before, which was one of our first, probably one of our most well, not maybe not our most well, but certainly one of our most well known songs. And for me, like, arguably my favorite piece of work of ours, and maybe I've ever done, which was like fucking 13 years ago. So my best is behind me. Anyway, I don't think I'll ever top it. But the point is, I remember I was 22 years old, 21, 22 years old, went into a writing session with a big, relatively well known, not too big, but a relatively well known producer. And he had a friend with him there at the session. For some reason, he had a friend with him who was also a songwriter or a musician, but was also a radio plugger. So his job was to take songs to radio. In this instance, it was obviously for people in America wouldn't necessarily understand this, but like Radio Watch, you know what Radio One is? Have you ever heard of Radio One?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so like biggest British radio station, certainly at the time. He said to me, he was like, "This song will never get on Radio One because it doesn't have a chorus." And I said to him, "That's bullshit. you don't know what you're talking about, and please leave. This is our song. Basically, I told him to go fuck himself, right?
Hmm.
Okay. That song, that song went on to be in 2014, was the most played song on Radio 1 of that year by any artist. So for some reason, when I was 22, I was so self-assured. I hadn't had any success, nothing, but I didn't have any doubt. And I think at this point, with the other story that I was referring to, I think we were still in that phase of like, we still had this youthful kind of like, we don't care attitude, which honestly, I wish I had more of today. I think it's been beaten out of me a little bit, where like I kind of, as with age, I kind of almost care more. I think it's a big problem for artists and producers. I think it's something I really try to address in myself, having more confidence in my opinion, because, you know, it's been there in the past, but I think every artist probably battles with that.
Where does confidence come from?
Oh, I don't know. I'd love some. I, I I think it comes from like ignorance, maybe. Like maybe it comes from ignorance. I'm always kind of amazed sometimes with like some of the younger people I work with, producers, artists, songwriters, how confident they are. I remember working with this guy in a session. I wrote a song with a session. I know I will say it. I wrote a song with an artist called Litany, and one of the people in the room who was writing songs who I think is great, and I really like them, and I think they're really 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 talented. But they were like, "Oh, this won't be a hit if it doesn't do this," and I was like, "But have you had a? I don't know. How can you say that? I don't think you've actually had a hit. So how do you know? Like where's that coming from? I don't know. But the confidence kind of was amazing. He was very young, and I think he just kind of had this kind of confidence in that opinion. Maybe, and it cut, and look, the song got cut and she put it out. So I guess like he was kind of right. Like we went with his decision. It wasn't a hit, but the point is like, maybe he was right for that song. And I guess just like, but maybe like the ignorance or like the kind of youthful sort of like exuberance, just like it's a bit like kind of a punk type attitude, I think comes
Mm.
with that. He kind of has that attitude. So I was a bit more like that when I was younger.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I think there's like a little bit of irreverence that maybe people have, or just a really strong sense of like it's easier maybe in a sense to be idealistic when you're younger. And I think especially when you have maybe a song or an idea that you wrote and you really feel like I want this to be the thing that people hear.
I think the idealism is, I think that's very accurate. Yeah, I think there's an idealistic, I think I'm less idealistic than I once was. Some people definitely think I'm like, what's the word when it's sort of, I was actually saying to somebody, not deluded when you're like, you almost
Like
sort of
jaded.
jaded.
Yeah.
I am a bit jaded.
Interesting. I love that I mean, so Hey Now, I'm sure a lot of people listening, if you, I mean, probably already know the song. And so you mentioned that it took you a long time to write that one. So, and I know we're going back a long time in your memory here, but I'm curious because it has such a strong connection to you. If you remember, because I think there is this sort of interesting thing where like, is a song as good as much work went into it? Do you know what I mean? Like, if I worked really hard, does that make the song better? Versus, does a good song just fall out? Right.
Just amazing question. As far as I'm aware, I'm going to tell you I honestly, I think I don't actually think there's any answer there. I think it can be both,
Mm.
which is a very Rick Rubin answer. He would say that. He'd be like, yeah, it can be. But look, there are definitely examples. And I think like our first album was a lot of work went into it. We worked really, really hard at that record. Did Hey Now, when it was first written, did it just appear? It kind of did just appear in a jam one day. But from the inception of the idea to the finished product was a year or 2 years. And it'd already taken us 3 years or 2 years to get to the point where we were capable of writing something like that. We were playing shows, working on the sound. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, we wrote that in an afternoon, but the truth is it took us 2 years to kind of write to get to the point where we were capable of writing that song, and then it still took us 2 years to produce the song, right? So it was like started the band when I was like 19, song came out when I was like 23 or something like that, right? But I was recently in the studio with Greg Alexander. He was in a band called the New Radicals, right?
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. Okay, I
you
didn't.
only get what you give, right? He wrote that song. He also wrote Murder on the Dance Floor, by the way, by Sophie Ellis Bextor, which obviously had a huge resurgence last year, or the year before, because of Saltburn, the film. And I was speaking to him about he's like been a hero of mine because I love that song. You only get what you give so much. One of my favorite.
It's incredible, man. Yeah, yeah.
It's literally it's the best. Is it the best pop? I think it might be the best pop song of all time. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it's like
It's
a newer.
incredible.
It's like up there with "Come On Eileen" in a newer generation. Like
Yeah,
it's like that kind of thing. Yeah.
it's funny you say that. My dog's actually called Eileen. One of my "Come on Eileen" is one of my favorite songs. Um, so he said to me, he told me, I was like, look, Greg, I was like, I know you've told it 100 times, but I want to know, like, what's the story about the song? Like, how? And he just like, he's such a character. He's such an amazing guy. That he told me the whole story, you know, and he what he did say to me about you only get what you well, he told me about the whole album, and he was like, when he wrote that one song with Rick Knowles, by the way, who's another legendary songwriter for anybody who's interested. He wrote like most of Lana Del Rey's sort of most well-known songs, apart from video games, but a lot of her most well-known material and Belinda Carl. I just Madonna, loads of stuff. Anyway, I think Madonna. I might be making that up. I don't know, but lots of hits anyway. And they made this. Greg made this album, and he was like, he made the rest of the album was made in a few months, but he knew for whatever reason, you only get what you give was the song, and he put everything. He took 90% of his budget, his recording budget, and put it into that song. He took 90% of his time and put it into that song. He said he worked at it and he worked at it for months, just deliberating over this one song. He went crazy making the song. Like that's what he did. And he actually said to me in the session, he was like, the thing is, what music even more so now is so saturated. Like there's so much music being made and put, you know, how many 10,000 songs being uploaded a day plus AI music now, you know, like he's like only excellence rises to the top. So in his mind, he's like the correlation is clear. He's like the more work that goes into it, the more, you know, obviously you need the spark of imagination that comes with the initial concept of the idea, but to actually make something great, you need to put in the time. And I do kind of agree with him. Like that seems to be my experience anyway. It's like the concept or the initial inspiration can be like that, but then actually to finish something, you know, is a process, and it can take a lot of work. That's my experience.
So the short answer is there's no answer.
Unfortunately, I don't think there is an answer because let's be honest, like Jimi Hendrix recorded "Are You Experienced" in a day. So I'm sorry, it's just kind of one of those things. Like there is no answer. But my process is probably one of more deliberation. I think this kind of maybe a more modern phenomenon as well, sort of deliberating more over music. And I spoke about this with Ricky, by the way. You're seeing this kind of almost kickback artists like Adriana Lenka, in particular, Big Thief. I don't know if people are familiar with those. You know, do you know that band, Big Thief?
Yeah, I don't know Adriana Lenker though.
She's the lead singer of Big Thief,
Oh, okay.
and she has like her own solo project, which is sort of quite successful. Well, very successful actually as
Ah,
well.
okay. I didn't realize that. Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah, and you know their ethos is much more like record to tape, what you know, like live, not overthought, not over edited. So it's much more, it's less cerebral, you know, like, and I think that that is really interests me as well. I spoke a lot about it with Ricky, in fact.
Yeah, how does that kind of that tendency to be more kind of like taking your time and deliberate over decisions, how does that work in the context of the other members of London Grammar?
I think it works in the context of the band because I think we deliberate together, and I think that that deliberation process is like kind of what makes London Grammar, and it's what sort of develops the sound. You know, it's what's kind of built the world, in my opinion, and I think it's quite a normal and healthy sort of process for us as a band. I find.
So I got to ask you some nerdy questions for the producers listening, because I'm really curious about your.
You're going to get bad answers, I reckon. But go on.
But yeah, I want to specifically the guitar tone, man. I want to know: are you DI? Are you amp on the records? DI and amp, and then to what extent, if it's out of the box or in the box, what does the signal chain look like?
I was always amps. I'm definitely like an amp, a believer in amps. Even live as well. Like I have literally had my monitor tech, my front of house. They've been begging me to get onto Kempers or like some other kind of amp modeling units. I tried the UAD stuff. Actually, the UAD Ox box was the first thing that really impressed me, where it felt because it's a cabinet simulation, so you're still using the head of the amplifier, but you're getting this kind of perceived air from a cabinet. Do you know? Have you experienced? Do you know the Oxbox? Have you seen
I
that
know it
thing?
actually. I've never
Yeah,
played
fine.
through one though, but yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
it's
familiar
very
with it.
good.
Yeah.
And actually, a friend of mine who's an amazing guitar player called Alex Haynes. He and if anybody's interested, like I made a video of his brother who's a drummer in his tiny studio. He's a great hit. They're twins who both session musicians who like have a tiny studio in Finsbury Park in London, and they are like gear obsessed, like obsessed jazz musicians, like pure ultra purists, and he thought the Oxbox was of serious quality. And so if he thought it, I was like, anyway, but I've stuck with amps. The tone, in particular, the tones that I'm sort of most known for, the sort of plucky kind of like almost sort of like glassy tones are like Vox AC30
Mm.
and a Fender Twin, just stereo pair, um, with a Flint Strymon pedal, which is like the reverb set on the 80s, this 80s channel. It's like that very specific type of reverb, kind of slightly like sort of digital emulation reverb. For some reason, I just landed on that. That's just like kind of a fluke when I was a kid. And that's really been the basis of the sound. Other things like delay wise, we did use like in the box delays a lot. So like we were using stuff like H delay, like a Waves plugin for certain like ping pongy kind of, unlike things like Wasting My Young Years or like Hell to the Liars and like some of our later stuff. Like those kind of delays were being used, but then as like time progressed, I sort of got more interested in other pedals and other guitars, and you know I had played a Strat really almost exclusively on our first album, which is like the basis of the sound. But then I've sort of now played hollow body. I just you get bored and then you just on to the next thing.
The AC30 and the Fender Twin Mix, are you doing that in one take through both amps at the same time, or are you doing multiple takes?
No, no, same. On the first album, it was all in particular. Actually, second album as well. But on our third album, which is called Californian Soil, it was more of a bedroom production. So the majority of the album was made like in my bed, in my studio, in my house with the guys, and we sort of moved towards this kind of more DIY style for some reason. Just like a control thing, really. So then it kind of became more like triple tracking, and I had like smaller amps, and I was messing around with like shittier amps, and but on that first album, we were recording in a studio called State of the Art, which was legendary. I mean, well, actually, no, legendary is the wrong word. Cult. It was a cult studio in Richmond, England, owned by a guy called Terry Britton, who wrote "What's Love Got to Do with It" by Tina Turner, right?
Wow.
And he built the studio basically as an homage to Abbey Road. And he had like an old EMI desk with like the airport faders. And it was like the original side cart that the Beatles recorded, and like they had pool techs and I didn't even know anything. Well, I was just like 20. I didn't know what. I just know it looked amazing and sounded amazing. And we had our amazing producers Tim Brown and Roy Kerr, and an incredible engineer called Manon Grandjean, who's gone on to become one of the most respected mix engineers in England. And we basically, Terry had a huge guitar selection, he had a huge amp collection, and he had a massive amp room. And we set up these two amplifiers, side by side. Manon mic'd it in a particular stereo fashion, and then that became the kind of basis of the sound. So it was always like we would multi-track guitars, but like one guitar part was always played through two amps. Basically, somehow the signal was split and sent out to two amps.
And then I also want to say, man, stylistically, what's really cool to me is like somebody who plays some guitar also is there's just so much restraint in your playing. And I think like guitar stereotypically it and understandably so like carries the stereotype of just like people that just play way too many notes, you know? And so I'm really curious like what your philosophy is like around guitar playing and songwriting that way.
It's honestly partly to do with literally lack of ability. I'm not just saying people like say that, but I do. It's partly what it is. I'm not like a virtuosic at all. I really am not. I'm not classically trained. I have no training, and I'm just kind of like, And I was in a band where like we came at a point where like the truth is like I'm quite being quite cynical about it. Like I knew when we started the band there was another band called the XX who were very popular. And I was like, look, Robbie is making these songs, which is like one note type glacial atmospheric things. And I was like, I'm gonna take a bit of that. And then I kind of like did a bit of edge, like U2 edge.
Mm-hmm.
And it was simple. It was just like, and but like what it did was like build an atmosphere around everything. It kind of, and I was using long reverbs and delays, which kind of created this kind of bed of sound almost, which kind of is quite synonymous now with the sound of the band. And then also like when you've got like a big vocal like Hannah, you kind of need to stay out of the way of it. And I think also we always knew that like a production aesthetic that really worked for us was one of space, like having not crowding the, and I think that's something that we all try to do as musicians is not play too much or like be too jammy or kind of like it's much more orchestrated and it's like thought out. Each part is very deliberate. Every beat is very deliberate. No one's like showing off. It's not jazz or fusion. There's nothing like playery about it really. So I think that was the ethos that was in the band anyway. I think that was my ethos as a player. And it's kind of always been like a bit of a hang up in a sense of mine because I think like people always say what you said to me. They always say to me, "You're so restrained, you're so like it's so," and I can't take the compliment. I just like struggle. I remember playing Lollapalooza in Chicago. We played Lollapalooza in Chicago. I was probably not in my best head space at the time. We played this show and it was a good show. It was great. Like we were British band in America, had a good crowd and I played fine. But I came off stage. It was one of those shows. Anyone who's been a musician knows they come off stage. Sometimes they're like, even if people tell you it was a good show, you thought it was shit because you just did it. You just did, right? Have you
Mm-hmm.
ever been there? This happened, right?
For sure.
And there was a guitar player there. Her name's Carmen. I can't remember her last name. Her name's Carmen, and she is an unbelievable guitar player. She's friends with my bandmate Dot's brother Bruno Major, also unbelievable guitar player, incredible musician. And Carmen like played in Jeff Beck's band.
Oh, wow.
Like she's unbelievable guitar player. And she came up to me after the show and she was like, Dan, she's like, you're so amazing to hear like how restrained you are. Every note is very deliberate. Is really beautiful. And I just totally took it as like her being like I took it really badly. I was like, she just said that because she's like, she thinks I'm shit, and it's because I don't buy. And it was really weird. I was so in my own head, I was smoking way too much weed as well, by the way. I don't do that anymore because of this reason. Because I was so in my head and I just couldn't take the compliment. And it was really, I'm so upset. She was just being really nice to me and she was being really sweet and actually genuine. And like, what a compliment to have from somebody of her caliber. She's a incredible guitar player. But yeah, going back to the confidence, my confidence has been beaten out of me a little bit. And, but no, I think I'm like coming to terms with it a little bit more and understanding that that's like a real like good thing about my playing and I'm like very tasteful and that's really cool.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Remember, Producer Head grows thanks to listeners and supporters like you. So if something here resonates, take a second to let us know by following, liking, subscribing. Your support means everything. By subscribing and sharing, you help us grow the Producer Head community, which allows us to continue bringing you incredible conversations just like this one and opens the door to even more exciting guests in the future. Let's keep building this together. All right, back to the episode. Yeah, I mean, I would argue it's part of the artistry, right? It's sort of like,
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and I think that's the thing is like, just because you can lift a lot of weight doesn't mean you walk around with a barbell all day. You know, I don't know. It's just like,
You know what, actually, even I'm weirdly, this is a real like kind of weird thing about me. It's like I'm really interested. I've always been kind of weirdly interested, but more recently, the last sort of, I think since I sort of like became healthier, I got really into weightlifting and like lifting like bodybuilding, and I like really interested in bodybuilding and like as a culture, I find it fascinating. There's definitely a case it actually to even just hone in on your analogy that you said, actually just because you lift heavier weight, if you don't lift the weight correctly with the correct technique or like apply it to the correct muscle group in the focused way, you won't build muscle. Some of the best bodybuilders don't necessarily lift the heaviest. necessarily. Some of them do, but there is an argument. There have definitely been bodybuilders in the history of like the great bodybuilders who don't lift overly heavy. Like Phil Heath is a perfect example. One of the most famous bodybuilders. This is real, like specific. Like, do you know who Phil Heath is? You ever heard of Phil Heath?
No.
He's basically like a seven-time Mr. Olympia winner, one of the most famous bodybuilders of all time, and he was known for not training heavy, very precise training, like lifted low weight and kind of built his physique in that style. Quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool. So I really love what you're saying because really what it's like is sort of like if you understand what your goal is, it's how do you leverage the tools available to you to achieve that goal in like kind of the most direct way, right? And so
100%.
in that it's like you can be more scientific and deliberate about the way that you lift, and it's not just being able to lift more. Being stronger doesn't necessarily translate to bigger muscles and vice versa. And being a shreddy guitar player doesn't make you a better artist or a good songwriter.
100% not. And I think the proof is in the pudding there. Like I've met loads of incredible guitar players. I grew up with loads of incredible guitar players who could shred like all day, all night. It doesn't count for that much. People don't want to hear it. Having said that, if you can have both, game over. I do wish I was more technical, and it annoys me that I'm not. I do try to better myself in all aspects, but I am also lazy, and I do think like I am. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard. I don't, lazy is wrong. I'm being a bit hard on myself. I don't think I'm not lazy at all. But I do think when it comes to technical side of whether it's engineering, producing, I am quite. Some people that I work with have like a running joke that like even though I'm a guitar player, I always try to outsource the guitar playing. I'll be like, can we get this guy in? He's a much better guitar player than me to do the part, or something like that. Because I do wish I had more technique, but I think as my goals shift to like away from just being a guitar player and just like actually making records, which is what I've always done with the band, but it's, my job within the band is very clear. But as I try to do more sort of songwriting and producing, at least trying to outside of the band, uh, there's so much to do as there is in the band. There's so much to do when you're making a record that isn't just playing your instruments, just everything. So much. Least of all, like the the diplomacy of making a record. Even that, there's a lot. So, but I wish I was more technical. I do.
What do you think it is that you like understand really deeply about making a good song?
I think the best work that I do are the pieces of music or the songs that are like really emotional. I think like that's definitely the thing I do best. And I think I understand how to make something like that moves people like sort of quite deeply. I think I understand that and I think I can recognize that in something and I can hear when something goes from being like on the surface to actually like almost unsettling. I think there's something about that. There's a song that we made. It's called "All My Love." It's like a song on our third album, and it's what actually is one of my favorite pieces of work of ours, and my one of my favorite sort of contributions to the production process that I think I've done. Even though it wasn't a particularly big song, which always kind of like irked me a bit. I was almost like, why is it? In fact, I had this experience which is kind of, and this is going to sound really, in case you didn't realize, my ego is out of control because I just like make videos and do podcasts about myself and I just talk nonstop. But no, we wrote this song called "All My Love," and I remember like I always loved it, and I was like, oh, this song one day is going to get sick, it's going to be someone's going to sing it or something. It's going to be it'll be in an advert, whatever. And I remember like a year ago, I was like feeling a bit. I was having one of those days. I was like, I'm shit. Nothing I make is any good. I'm like, I can't do this or whatever, just where everyone has those days, right? You have those days. And then I did like the really dark kind of weird thing that artists do is like where I kind of looked back on something that was released and sort of read some comments for validation, and I went and the song I went to for whatever reason was "All My Love," and I went onto YouTube and there's like a YouTube upload of the song with like a visual element, and I was looking at the comments and the comments are just like, I played this at this funeral. This was at this funeral. Funeral, funeral, funeral. We're talking tens of people's funerals. And I was just like, fuck. Like, that's crazy, because that's what that song is. It's like almost like a funeral song. And I was like, but that's to me, like, if that can't, and I reality checked myself because I was like, if I can't be okay with the fact that something I've made has been important enough to send somebody out of their life to, I was like, then I'm literally like, what am I doing? You know, I need to like seriously check myself. So, you know, I think I get that. I think that's something I do understand, probably because I'm just like a bit weird
Mm.
on the inside.
Yeah, but I mean, it sounds like you do just really have a strong connection to feelings.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, it's unfair because I'm sort of asking you like how to clinically explain that or like technically explain that, right? But like understanding that feeling and harnessing it in the form of a song, something that can kind of live eternally and be interpreted in an infinite number of ways by other people.
It is hard because what the problem is with it is that if you try to, this is the literally the most nebulous kind of, I mean, potentially, I kind of have to check myself before I say it because it sounds so pretentious what I'm about to say, but there is truth to it. My bandmate, if Hannah was here right now, she'd be like, what are you doing? The pretentious answer is, in my opinion, is if you try to analyze it, you're not going to get it. The best work I've done usually is the stuff where like I just let it flow out of me and I'm not challenging it. I'm not thinking about it. Like, you know what? I had an experience today where I was working on the production of a song that I've written. And the whole time I was working on it, everything I was doing, I was like, this is going to be a bit like this. And I was very analytical. So it was like, oh, this is going to be that person would think this is because there's a few people involved in the song. I was like, I have to like appeal to them and like appease them. I did it. I spent like 3 hours working on it, and I was like, this is good. This is really good. I sent it to the artist. It's a girl called Connie, who's amazing, and I've been making an album with her. So we have a good relationship. But I sent her the song, and she's like, "No, I don't like it. It's a bit shit." And I was just like, and I was just like, yeah, you're right. It's fine. But the point is like the best work is like, and the ones that like that have the most emotional depth are the ones that kind of come like from deep within, where you're not really don't even know why you did it or how you did it. Me and Hannah made this song the other day where we were like, and it's a great it's for her for a solo record she's made, and um we don't even remember how we made it. We don't remember. I remember the song after because I listened to it 100 times, but the process itself, I looked back through the stems and there's stuff I'm doing and like layering weird sounds and putting voice notes in and just doing, it's just like really just like throwing paint and just like not thinking and like, but like there's like intuition in there and like, there's technique in there as well. Obviously, I'm not completely terrible technician, but like, it's just like kind of really pure, the process. And I think like then, and that those are the ones that seem to resonate. All My Love was a bit like that. That song I mentioned. Hey Now's a bit like that.
So let me ask you a potentially weird question, which is where do ideas come from? Do you think that people create them, or do you think it's something like songs, ideas, art in general is like kind of the realization of something that we don't have the senses to see and is like captured and realized in those forms?
I mean, I'm always a little bit like on this one. I'm always like a bit half, but I can tell you for a fact. I know what Hannah's opinion is, and she's like, I'm the vessel. The ideas exist and you tune in and then they come through you and you just that's kind of like the most observed kind of opinion I think that most people have. And I but the truth is about that, and this I do think different people are different, and I personally don't always relate it to stories I've heard or like things I've witnessed or people like people who I deem to be like above me and like of worth, like in a sense because I don't, I just when you're in your own career in life, you don't judge it in that way. But I remember I went to something called the Ivor Novello Awards, which is a songwriting awards in England. It's a very famous, a very prestigious award ceremony. And there was a guy called Bob Geldof who, do you know who Bob Geldof is? I feel like most Americans wouldn't know him by name, but he basically created something called Live Aid, which was like a massive
Oh,
event
yeah.
in
Okay. Yeah.
huge event. He was like the guy behind it, but he was also a musician and he was in a band called the Boomtown Rats. And they had a hit in the 70s called I Don't Like Mondays, which is an amazing song, by the way, which he wrote. Amazing song. He's best friends with Sting. You know who Sting is, obviously,
Yeah.
right? And he was giving Sting an award at the Ivors for like his lifetime achievement. And Bob Geldof was saying that like Sting is like a master sculptor. When he sculpts a piece of music, it's like a thing of beauty because he's the true artist, right? He's a true artist. He's like, whereas talking about himself, he was like, I'm like hacking away at a piece of wood every day, just hoping, praying that something good comes out, right? I'm just hacking. Sting's like, and I'm hacking. And I was like, that's me. I'm the hacker, right? Hannah, someone like Hannah is like Sting. She's like, for some reason, she has this ability. She's just like the truest sense of the artist, right? And Sting, after Bob introduced him, Sting goes on the stage and he starts talking about how he wrote a song called Message in the Bottle, right? You know, Message in the Bottle. And he's so pretentious, Sting, like in an amazing way, but he's so pretentious. It's like ridiculous how pretentious. Obviously, you can because he's Sting, but he's so literally the most pretentious person ever. And he's sat back and he's got his guitar and he's just like, I was sitting in a car, I was sitting on a tour bus. He's like, I'm sitting on a tour bus. He's like on stage, by the way, in front of 300 people. Like this. Like I was sitting on a tour bus and I was looking out the window, and suddenly this song came to me, and he's like this in real time. He's like, dun, 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 dun. Just across the way, an island so sad sea, and I was just like, fuck, that actually happened to you, didn't it, bro? Like you were just in a tour bus because you're Sting, and someone just gave you Message in the Bottle, and you're so gifted. Your antennae is so gifted. You just you can't argue with that, man. It's one of the best songs of all time.
It's a jam. I mean,
It's a jam.
if you haven't heard that somehow, please go listen to it. Yeah, like I love the idea of antennae. So like how do you think, is it something you even try to do? Do you think about how can I maybe more finely attune or develop this?
I think the problem is like because I think my role in both the band and in any project I get involved in, I think I am a little bit. I'm probably more of a shepherd than in a sense, which is what some people would say is like the person who kind of guides the person with the antennae. I shepherd that out of them. I think that's my biggest skill in music. um, I'm very good at getting the best out of people. That's like my biggest skill, I think, like, literally hands down. But I also can make things, and I have made really good things that I'm proud of. You know, like from it, you know, whether it's like guitar parts or writing songs or ideas, lyric ideas. You know, they're a bit more fragmented. I'm a little bit fragmented, but I'm definitely capable of making them. And I would say like I tune into my antennae in those moments. There's a song actually on our third album called California Soul, which is one of my favorite things we've done. And I definitely had one of those moments where like sat down, wasn't thinking, antennae up, and just the riff came, and I just was like, okay, yeah, thanks, man. And then what's funny is then I'm just like, yeah, I pay like few things, put some beats in, it'll, like played it to dot. And I was just like, and his antenna just was like, wow, on a moog, he's like picks up a moog and he's just like, wow, he does the bass line. And then I played it to Hannah and she just antennaed the shit out of it. And she was just like, this, like, well, you can hear that, someone can go listen to it if they want, and she just brought Hannah, and it's like, so I do think it's important. I notice in writing sessions, I had this the other day in a writing session where I was like a bit nervous at the start of it, and if you're a bit nervous in a writing session with somebody you've never worked with, if you think about it, everything you play is just going to be shit. It just really will. You'll just be like, oh, this is terrible. I'm just playing I'm overthinking another chord sequence. So I just like tried to tune out, played one riff, and I was just like, oh, I don't know. It wasn't even anything that good. It was just a bit. It was free, And then he wrote a whole song to it, got a whole song in 2 hours. So I don't know if the song's any good, but the point was I got a song, and that's better than nothing. So, and he was an experienced artist, quite a well-known artist, and a guy called Tom Walker, who is a big artist in the UK. So experienced guy, and I think like he felt it in me, in that moment and gave me a song. Whether he may never use the song, but the point is he gave me a song, and that's something. So
Is the California Soil song, is it the title track, or is it a what song
it's
is
the
it on the
title
record? The
track.
title track.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
title track. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. No, so I wanted to ask you, man, because earlier you mentioned how you guys, after, was it the third record, California Soil? Is that the third one? That at that point, you guys went back to a DIY state. And I'm really curious about that because, you have two successful albums in a row. And with that success, also, I assume comes like, at least the optionality of like bigger production, more access. And to then make a decision as a band to kind of like, we're going to do this in a smaller space, essentially. Talk about that.
To be honest with you, that was because I kind of thought that that's the way things were going. And I felt that in order to make something that sounded current, it needed to be born in that environment. And also, not just that, but our first album was really born in a garage, in a garage environment. And then we took it to a big studio. Whereas our second album was kind of born in studios. We were like, we had sold 1 million copies. We were like, right, go spend 200 grand writing an album. Like stupid, like stupid stuff. And it's interesting though because like looking back on it, we were quite sort of critical about what after our release of our second album. We were as a band quite critical of our own work. We thought that the second album, maybe in hindsight, had been a bit dry. Maybe we'd been too focused on being really like a real like audiophile record. We were obsessed with like fidelity and like we really wanted to make this like songwriter focused, like very serious album. And actually, when we delivered it, it wasn't as nowhere near as commercially successful as our first. It was still successful, but it wasn't this huge hit as our first album. So I think the third album was a little bit of like that desire to return to like some kind of DIY kind of garage sort of impulse that came out from the first one. But the interesting thing is actually looking back on it, the second one is called Truth is a Beautiful Thing. It sounds amazing. I mean, the fidelity is incredible. The songs are great. Like we did good work, and a lot of our fans think it's their favorite record. So and I don't know. I think it is really interesting. There's so much of it I just don't understand. Honestly, like I've been doing this a long time, and I just really don't understand a lot of it still. It's but I think that that's the thing that like why we're having this conversation. Why I'm literally spending my money making those videos like with Ricky. Like no one's paying me to do that, by the way. I'm like those videos cost me like 3 grand a pop. Like I'm literally like spending money like it. My wife thinks I'm insane.
Bro, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit because I love, like, we talked about this before we went on. I mean, I love that video that you do with Ricky, right? And I think, and I was such a big Uptown, I listened to that fucking record, dude, on repeat back in the day. So,
Same.
yeah, I mean, I mean, and I'm just such a big Mark Ronson is like, I'm a huge fan. And so I'm just like, I saw that video, man, and I was just like, this is so dope on so many levels. Like, I could talk about just that video for a while. I think what's really cool and apparent to me on the surface of it is that you talk to somebody who's an expert in all the things that you are not, right? That's like first and foremost. Secondly, though, is like there, and I think you can hear it throughout this conversation all the way to now, and you see it throughout that video. We're definitely going to link that your channel and all that. People really got to go check out what you're doing. I think it's super cool. You don't seem to have an ego about your own ignorance around things like that. Like you're like, I'm not technical. I don't know this. You're like, you literally say in that video, like, I just throw an LA2A because that's what you do, right? So it's just like, and I think so many people can relate to that and feel self-conscious and won't admit that. And so I want to ask you, like, where does that come from? Like, is that a learned thing? Is that an innate thing? Because a lot of people are self-conscious about, like, people feel like they need to present as experts all the time.
I do think like that's more of a thing that's come. I would say having worked with the breadth of people I've worked with across the board, producers, songwriters, musicians, artists, just so many people now. It's been like 15 years. And I have seen the most successful people who know everything technical. Take someone like Greg Kirsten. Well, like, even, but then one thing I'll say is no one's the finished article. I've not met the finished article yet. I've not met one person who can do everything and has everything,
Just Sting, that's it.
apart from Sting. Actually, Sting is probably the one. Sting's problem is he's pretentious. So he can't make anything down to earth. He just makes fields of gold. Unless he's in the police, then he's got the other two to bring him. No, like for example, Paul Epworth is a good example, who I do think is up there with Mark Ronson in my opinion. Um, maybe not, maybe because his own project wasn't like in the didn't he hasn't had Uptown Funk yet, but he probably will. Paul was an incredible engineer, but he wasn't the most technical musician. He wasn't the most technical engineer. He was just a big experimenter. He was just like passionate and experimented, and he was like punk rock about it. He just do crazy shit. I was in the church when his studio, and we were talking about he had like this EMS synth, which is like an old like the synth that Pink Floyd like programmed Dark Side of the Moon on. It's like a kind of one of the early sort of modular synths, I guess. And the engineer was telling me how like Paul uses them as mic inputs because they sound kind of cool. It's like, but no one's using them as mic. That's just mental. It doesn't make any sense. So he's just like he just explores. But then you've got people like I've seen people like Greg Kurstin, who's one of the he wrote like Hello by Adele and is like one of the most successful producers at the moment, and he is unbelievable keyboard player, synth wizard, genius, like he's incredible and he's had success. But then I've also worked with Rick Knowles, probably had more hits than anybody, or someone like Steve Mack, who's probably had loads of one of the most hits in British songwriting history, and they can kind of play. They're like not that good. They're fine, but their instinct is good, and they know, they just know what makes a hit song. So I've seen basically, or like I've seen Ryan Tedder. Like Ryan Tedder, like doesn't he's not shredding when he picks up an instrument. So it's like these people. I mean, they're just like Mark Ronson. Actually, even Mark Ronson, most specifically, as Ricky kind of infers, maybe not as much as Ricky would want to say because he obviously Ricky worked for him. But I think it's kind of known fact that Mark Ronson, like for example, on the Back to Black, Back in Black, Amy Winehouse records. The genius of that record is that Mark, well, it's the debate. This is the debate. And this is why I had a little bit of conversation with Ricky because I think it's a little bit underplayed. I think like Mark takes a lot of the credit, obviously, but the truth is he went to Daptone, he went to the Daptones and Gabe I can't remember what his name is, Bossman, well, legend,
The
Ranger
Dap Kings
and
are amazing. Yeah.
the Dap King. I mean, they're just incredible. He was the arranger. He made those arrangements and he engineered those records and he really produced those records, you could argue. But Mark had the idea and Mark wrote the song. So it's like, and Mark was the marketing genius behind it. So,
All right, so that leads me to exactly what I want to ask you next, man. And then before that, and then after this, I'm going to close it out for you. But so, just like being in a band, I think like timing is such an interesting part of like your guys' story. But as a band and a member of a band, and like just describing that Mark Ronson situation, how collaborative these things are to make these amazing records, and that now we're in this space where like, and a lot of people that listen to the show are kind of like individual producers trying to like lift it all themselves. You know what I mean? And so, I guess like, can you speak a little bit to just how important it is, what even if you're going to continue to really try to be a solo artist in some way, to get other people involved in the value in that and how important that is?
look, for me personally, like it's literally everything. Like I just think it's like the most fundamentally the most important thing for me about making music. Is literally why I make music. It's what I love most about it. I wish I could do everything myself, but I can't. And I do enjoy working on my own. I do enjoy working on my own. And I wish I had all the tools to do it myself. But I do think that the best, most fun thing is when everyone unites and like makes something amazing together and everyone uses their strengths and you have that collaboration. I just think it's like where you get like the really kind of, which is the most fun, but it's also maybe makes the most interesting, different, special, potentially. It's hard to say. Look, Kevin Parker, Tame Impala, he don't need anybody. He's doing it all himself. Mac DeMarco, these guys are doing it all themselves. So it's hard to say, but my experience is one of, I think that even I think they probably enjoy collaboration. I'm sure they collaborate, and I'm sure they have people doing things for them, play with players, and get, I'm sure they enjoy the collaborative process. But yeah, for me, I this is all I know. It's all I know, and I love it. And I think like Mark Ronson is clearly the same. It seems to me. I think he is literally the living proof of like if you love Mark Ronson, I think you have to accept that collaboration is the answer. Put it that way.
Right on, man. So I just want to. We have these like kind of short, quick hit, rapid fire questions I like to ask at the end that I'll run you through. Which doll do you use?
Which what? Sorry. Which door? Oh, Logic.
3 favorite albums.
Hunky Dory by Dave Bowie, Abbey Road by the Beatles, and Mr. Hudson and the Library. That's a deep cut.
Yeah, I don't know this. I'm gonna have to go check this out. Okay. What's the one technical thing that's helped you be a better artist?
I would say recently, I would say two things. More recently, that I feel like have really helped from a more technical perspective is trying to gain stage a little bit. So like making sure like I'm not pushing the limiter, like slamming the limiter all the time, and like everything just redding out, and actually just decreasing volume and then adjusting afterwards seems to help me make more kind of my demos sound closer to records, it seems to me. That's like in an engineering sense. In a more sort of slightly more cerebral sense, like using space and understanding reverb in a spatial sense feels like quite an interesting one to me. Like understanding room, using the space in a room to kind of create ambience rather than always relying on digital reverbs or those kind of things. That's kind of an interesting technique.
That's a really cool answer, man. Plugins you love and their use cases.
I do love like I use fucking tape emulations a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I like those. I just like any kind. Like I know I said it in honestly any kind of LA2A emulation. I'm like yeah, I love LA2As a lot because they're just so simple. I just love them, and I love the color of them.
Something you bought for music and never used.
Bloody hell, you know I ain't gonna get a teenage engineering uh deal off of this. You know that teenage engineering like calculator,
Yeah.
average. Barely used it,
Oh
barely
my
touched
god,
it.
that's amazing. The calculator.
Yeah.
One habit that sabotages your creativity.
Oh, just like being on my phone, doom scrolling, 100% disastrous.
Something that you wish more people understood about music and or production.
I wish people who don't make music, I wish they understood that like what my wife often thinks like I literally just sit around talking for most of the day, which is what I do. I spend most of my days just chatting.
In case in point, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As anyone can tell. That to me is like sometimes the most draining thing that you can do. And it's really hard and intense. But I think it's like what literally why I'm here. Like why as in why I've had a career. And why you're even remotely interested in talking to me. It's because I just love chatting.
It's been a lot of fun, man. All right, movie that changed the way you think.
A movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a few, but I do think for some reason Donnie Darko, when I first watched it, was around the time I started the band, and that was like really just like I really was like into that film. I think it was like very stylized, and I think that kind of made me understand like how important stylization is in the presentation of something.
Best advice you've actually used.
I'm just thinking of my friend Ray. My mentor is a guy called Ray. I know I'm supposed to be short answers, but sorry. My mentor is a guy called Ray Coffer who he managed the Smashing Pumpkins and he also managed the Cocteau Twins.
Dude, Siamese Dream is one of my favorite. I mean,
he's a legend. He is a legend. This guy. He once said to me, he was like, as long as no one's dead, you can sort it out. And I was like, that's pretty, yeah, you're right. Basically, he was like, no, there's no issue that's too big to solve. And he's like, as long as no one's dead, you can kind of figure it out, which I think was good advice.
What fictional character do you see yourself in?
I'm quite small, so I just see like Bilbo Baggins.
Oh my god!
For my for like you have like a stag. Do you have like a what a stag do is like what's it? Like I don't know.
A bachelor party.
Bachelor party.
Yeah.
For my bachelor party, my friends just dressed me up as like a series of very small characters. Like I was like Frodo, like like little elves and things.
Yeah. What are friends for, man?
Yeah, man.
All right, man. I guess this is the last thing. Question from the previous guest, as we do here. What would you be doing if you weren't doing music?
Oh, bloody hell. Probably some terrible job in advertising that I hate. Like, and I'd be miserable. Or working in a record label. I'd probably, to be honest with you, I'd probably be working in a record label and be miserable.
That's all the questions, man, that I got for you at the moment. Is there anything that you want to leave the people with? Any words of wisdom? Any thoughts or feelings?
I think I've given my wisdom for sure. Um, I ain't got that much. I've given it all. No, I'm just thanks for asking me to do this. Honestly, it's really so nice. Like, so I love how random it is. Just like that, you're in Mexico. It's in Mexico. It's in Mexico City. Did you say?
Yeah.
Because like that, Mexico City is like seems to be like the sort of like this new wave of sort of creatives and people moving there. Right? Is that a thing?
I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff happening down here for sure. Yeah.
Where are you originally from? From Mexico City?
Oh no, I grew up in the U.S.
You grew
I,
up in the US. I assume so. Yeah. Whereabouts?
oh, I've kind of lived all over. I was born in Baltimore, and I went to school like to uni in Virginia, and then I lived in California for about a decade, then Portland, and then here. Yeah, so I've kind of bounced around a bit.
Wow, Portland. What a trip that place is. That's crazy. Um, yeah, no, I'm just really glad we met.
Yeah, likewise, man.
You know, it's funny because talking about collaboration, I'll end on this, and I do mean this. Like, this is why collaboration is so important to me. I can just see, like, you've got those three guitars behind you, and talking to you for an hour and understanding, you know, you're telling me about Mark Ronson. I already know you're obviously a guitar player and a bass player, I assume, right? And I already know it's like, okay, if I make a record in the next year that I'm like maybe has like an Uptown Funk edge to it, is like a bit funky or something like that, I'm gonna hit you up and be like, "Do you want to put some guitar on this? Like, what's it? How does it work? You know, this is the budget, whatever. You know, like, and that's what I love. I'm like, this is what it's all about. Like meeting people and like having connection, then like making something with them and basically using them because I'm too shit to do it. That's the Mark Ronson philosophy. That's not his philosophy. I don't know him at all. I've never met.
But dude, so yeah, let me just close it, man, by saying like, you know, again, like thank you so much for being here. And I just hope like I think it comes through like just so clearly. Like your enthusiasm is just like through the fucking roof. And it's like amazing, like how much it's just like clear how like big of a fan of you are of music. And in my theory is like that you're such a deep appreciator and fan of so many different kinds of music that you somehow just like, you know, synthesize that to be able to write your versions of those songs to share with people. And that's amazing. And dude, and you're just like, you just that quote from your mentor, you just really don't take things too seriously. And I think somebody that's had your level of success, like it's just really cool to see that level of lightness and not to be afraid to be like, hey, I don't know the answer to this. And your ability to see talent in other people, man. So like, thank you so much for doing this. And I think everybody's going to enjoy hearing this so much.
Pleasure, man. Oh, honestly, it was so nice. I loved it. Great. Thank you so much for yeah, giving me the time.
Everybody, that concludes another episode of Producer Head. This has been Toru, and in a way, so are you. Peace. In this episode, Dan really gave us a masterclass in diplomacy, restraint, and collaboration, lessons any producer or songwriter can take into their sessions. Remember, it's not always about the flashiest playing or the perfect mix. It's about trusts, relationships, and capturing the emotion behind the music. Keep experimenting, keep collaborating, and don't forget to protect the spark. Peace. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave a rating and review wherever you're listening. This helps Producer Head find its place and its people. Without you, there is no Producer Head. Thanks again for tuning into Producer Head. Subscribe and join our community over at producerhead.substack.com so you never miss an episode. Substack subscribers receive exclusive access to the biweekly podium, a curation of my favorite discoveries on and offline over the past week. You'll also get access to Producer Head Bars, where I share the best of what's been shared with me to help you and other producers in our community grow. The podium and Producer Head Bars are designed to provide immediate inspiration and direct application in your creative process. So, subscribe at producerhead.substack.com to receive real inspiration and ideas you can use to elevate your own process today. If you care for the craft, get your exclusive access at producerhead.substack.com. This episode was co-produced, engineered, and edited by Matthew Diaz. Big thank you to him. From Producer Head, this is Toru, and in a way, so are you. Peace.